Hello everyone. Before we start, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below telling me where you're from and what time you're watching. Doing this tells YouTube to keep showing you stories exactly like this one. We were always warned never to follow the howls past Milbrook's final streetlight. According to the locals, that sound wasn't from wolves, and it wasn't the wind either. It was something much older, something that had learned to mimic them both. But the night my grandfather told me about the Blackwoods, his voice cracked like an old board underfoot. He said there was a family over in Kine Valley who hadn't shared a bed with another human for 8 generations. Not entirely. They'd shared it with dogs. Real dogs, at first half-wild creatures that saved Eli Blackwood from freezing to death back in the winter of 1872. But somewhere between survival and tradition, between warmth and worship, a line was crossed that no one talks about. For decades, neighbors chalked the strange sightings up to mountain gossip. Figures moving on all fours at dusk, yellow eyes glinting from farmhouse windows, voices that broke into growls mid-sentence. The Blackwoods came down to town just twice a year, cash in hand, always leaving before sundown. Folks said you could feel them staring from behind their collars, their smiles a little too wide, like masks that didn't fit the faces beneath. A few university researchers, anthropologists, and journalists went up there over the years. They always came back changed, or they didn't come back at all. Their notes, when they existed, were fragmented. Sketches of elongated jaws. Words scratched out so violently the paper tore. Phrases like, "The 8th generation is almost complete." Most of those notes were quietly buried, and the people who buried them have since died. But some of us still remember. We remember the way dogs in neighboring towns go silent on certain nights, ears flat, tails tucked. And we remember the tracks found in fresh snow, too large for a man, too deliberate for a beast. And we remember what Abraham Blackwood supposedly said the last time outsiders reached his porch. Evolution isn't slow for those who dare to sleep beside gods disguised as dogs. Tonight, we open the journal pages the Blackwoods didn't mean for us to see. We follow their bloodline through 8 generations of isolation, devotion, and a bond that became something monstrous. And if you keep listening, you'll understand why even the locals refused to speak their name after dark. The first record of the Blackwoods appears in a yellowed county ledger from 1871, a winter that nearly erased Milbrook from the map. Frostbite claimed men by the dozens and children vanished into snow drifts that never melted. Eli Blackwood was a young farmer then, stubborn and proud. When a blizzard swallowed his homestead, neighbors assumed he'd frozen alongside his wife. But weeks later, Eli staggered into town, gaunt and wild-eyed, wrapped in a pelt so fresh it still steamed in the cold. The story he gave was impossible. A pack of feral dogs had circled his cabin, not to devour him, but to press their bodies against him through the night. He said their warmth saved his life. At first, people called it a miracle. They raised a toast to the animals and to Eli's survival. But the next spring, when he returned to town, leading 2 of those dogs by rope, dogs that did not blink, dogs that watched the townsfolk with almost human suspicion, the whispers began. By 1883, Eli's descendants were known for a peculiar custom. Every newborn Blackwood slept between 2 hounds. Old letters speak of cradles lined with coarse fur instead of blankets, and lullabies sung in low growls. At first it seemed harmless, an eccentricity born of gratitude, but patterns emerged. The children's features sharpened. Their voices carried an odd timbre, a roughness that echoed in their laughter. Hunters reported seeing silhouettes slipping through the trees on all fours, their movements too smooth, too practiced to be accidental. One particularly chilling account comes from a school teacher named Martha Glay. In 1904, she wrote in her diary about a Blackwood boy who stared at her with a look she could only describe as predatory curiosity. His pupils, she wrote, contracted to slits when the light dimmed, and when the church bell rang, he flinched not in fear, but as though the sound were an irritation, like a dog hearing a pitch too high for us to notice. 2 weeks after her entry, Martha vanished during her evening walk. Only her parasol was found, snapped clean in half beside a trail of paw prints that began as human footprints. This was the moment the town began to lock its doors earlier, And it was the moment the Blackwoods stopped coming down for supplies before dusk. Something in that valley was changing, and not even the harsh winters could keep it buried forever. By the 1920s, Milbrook had changed. Telephone poles lined the main road. Electric light flickered in windows, and yet the valley beyond remained a shadow untouched by time. The Blackwoods farmstead, barely visible through fog and pine, was spoken of only in whispers. Stories circulated among railroad workers laying track near Kine Valley. Strange howling that began as a single note and then split into harmonies, as if more than one throat shared the same voice. Prohibition brought outsiders, bootleggers, drifters, men who thought the valley's remoteness could shield them from the law. A few set up camp too close to the Blackwood property. One, a man named Caleb Fisher, staggered into a roadhouse days later, coat shredded, eyes vacant. He spoke of hearing footsteps that weren't footsteps circling his tent, of a figure with long hair and a snout-like face crouching at the edge of the firelight. He refused to return to the valley, even under threat of arrest. 2 months later, his body was found at the base of a cliff, neck broken, his boots missing, as if something had tried them on. Newspapers ignored these tales, but private letters revealed the town's fear. One undated note discovered in an attic trunk in 1987 reads, "We buried another lamb behind the church. Not the Blackwoods doing, they said, but the tracks. They weren't right. And I swear on my mother's grave I heard a child laughing out there low and throaty like an animal." By mid-century, researchers began to take interest. In 1954, a biology student from Dartmouth, Thomas Rayner, ventured into Kine Valley with recording equipment. His surviving tape holds only 30 seconds of audio. Wind, a faint bark, and then a guttural, almost human voice whispering, "Go back." The rest of the tape is silence, and Thomas was never seen again. His family, still living in Vermont, refuses interviews to this day. Locals began marking their calendars around the Blackwoods' rare town visits. Twice a year, once in spring, once before the first snow, they'd appear purchasing salt, flour, and sometimes dog collars in bulk. Their clothes were plain but immaculately clean, and their movements were stiff, like marionettes learning to be human. Children were told not to stare, not to speak, and above all, never to follow them home. Even now, if you ask the oldest residents of Milbrook about those visits, their faces harden. They'll tell you the Blackwoods weren't dangerous, so long as you remembered the unspoken rules. But every year another rule seemed to be added, and every year the Blackwoods looked a little less like us. By the late 1970s, Milbrook was shrinking. Young families moved to bigger towns with factories and schools, leaving behind boarded windows and a graveyard of rusting tractors. But the Blackwoods stayed. Satellite photos from 1978 show their farmhouse roof patched with mismatched tin and dog pens sprawling across the property like an improvised fortress. Hunters began to report distant drumming at night. 3 beats, a pause, then 3 again, echoing through the hills like a coded signal. In 1982, a hiker named Linda Carr vanished after venturing into Kine Valley during a camping trip. Her friends said she'd been fascinated by the old Blackwood stories, even joked about meeting the wolf people. 2 weeks later, search teams found her backpack wedged in the fork of a tree 10 feet off the ground. The straps were neatly buckled. Beneath it, paw prints circled in deliberate patterns, not scattered like a dog's, but arranged as if spelling something. Locals whispered that the 8th generation had begun. Family photos taken secretly through long lenses revealed children with unsettling symmetry. Faces too perfect, too smooth, except for an occasional jutting jaw or amber-colored eye that caught the sun wrong. Their movements were precise, deliberate, as if rehearsed. An old man named Harold Boone, who'd spent his life hunting in those woods, swore he saw 2 figures on a ridge at dusk, one standing upright, the other on all fours, their heads tilting in the exact same way. By the 1990s, urban legends about the Blackwoods spread beyond Milbrook. Paranormal magazines printed grainy, possibly doctored photos of paw-like hands clutching fence posts. A television crew attempted a documentary in 1998, but abandoned the project after 2 nights, citing equipment failure and uncooperative locals. One cameraman later admitted off record that he woke to something sniffing at the tent flap, something that exhaled warm breath heavy with the smell of wet fur and rusted metal. Today, hikers still go missing in Kine Valley.
Cell phones die inexplicably.
Motion cameras capture streaks of movement that can't be animals, can't be human. And every few winters, the town's oldest residents close their curtains at dusk, muttering about a pact their grandparents made to keep Milbrook safe. Whatever the Blackwoods have become, they are no longer just a family. They are a lineage that learned to survive the cold by becoming something the cold couldn't touch. The 21st century was supposed to bury old folklore beneath cell towers and GPS signals, but Kine Valley resisted. Even with satellites watching from above, the Blackwoods remained phantoms. In 2006, a wildlife biologist named Serena Halt led a university team to track gray wolf migration through the region. Her notes, later leaked online, describe unsettling signs. Animal dens lined with fabric scraps, dog collars hanging from branches like trophies, and footprints that started as paw prints before morphing into something almost human. The last confirmed sighting of a Blackwood in Milbrook happened in 2011. A store clerk recalled a tall man with a hood pulled low and a young girl beside him. She moved like she wasn't used to standing still, he said, like she was listening for something only she could hear. They paid in cash, left before sunset, and no one saw them again. But it was the 2017 drone footage that reignited fear. A group of amateur urban explorers uploaded a grainy video of Kine Valley's treeline at dusk. The camera caught a figure darting between pines on all fours, too fast for the human eye to follow. For a single frame, amber eyes glowed in the lens flare and the video abruptly cut to black. The explorers deleted their channel the next day. Local authorities dismissed these stories as hoaxes. Yet hikers have returned from the valley with scratches too deep for briars and with stories too specific to dismiss. One woman swears she woke to rhythmic breathing outside her tent, matched perfectly to her own inhalations, as though something was imitating her just inches from the canvas. What makes the Blackwoods more terrifying than any monster story is the quiet persistence of their bloodline. There's no sudden attack, no theatrical reveal, just a slow, deliberate evolution happening where no one is watching. If you stand on Milbrook's edge on a pure, windless night, you might hear it. Two howls perfectly harmonized, weaving through the pines. The locals say it's just wolves, but the oldest among them shake their heads. Wolves don't know your name. Wolves don't sing in pairs of 8. What waits in Kine Valley now is the culmination of generations. 8 lifetimes of devotion to something that was never fully human. And every winter the howls seem a little closer to town. Milbrook today is little more than a scattering of mailboxes and sagging barns, but the valley still watches. Those who remain have grown skilled at silence. They don't report missing livestock. They don't complain about the strange claw marks on their sheds. And when asked about the Blackwoods, they'll say, "That family moved on long ago." But if you linger, if you buy them another drink, you might catch a flicker in their eyes. The same unease your ancestors might have felt staring into a forest too dark for lantern light. Last winter, a snowstorm stranded 2 travelers on the back road leading into Kine Valley. When they were rescued, hypothermic but alive, they insisted someone or something had guided them through the blizzard. One described a tall figure with a dog's head walking just ahead, always out of reach, but leaving clear, deliberate tracks in the snow. Rescue teams found no such tracks when they retraced the route. I managed to obtain a recording from a local who claims to have camped near the old Blackwood property in 2022. The audio is faint. Wind, a distant creak of branches, and then 2 overlapping howls followed by what can only be described as a child's laughter. The man who captured it has since left Milbrook. He told me, "I don't think they're hiding anymore. I think they're waiting." If the Blackwood story has taught us anything, it's that monstrosity doesn't always arrive in the form we expect. Sometimes it's generations of quiet devotion to a single terrible choice. A choice to trust the warmth of a beast over the coldness of human survival. 8 generations is a long time to blur a line, long enough for dogs to become family and for family to become something else entirely. Tonight, somewhere beyond Milbrook's last streetlight, the valley is alive with sound. Low growls folding into a hymn. Paws crunching snow in perfect rhythm. Whether you believe in the Blackwoods or dismiss them as folklore, the forest remembers. And if you ever find yourself hiking in Kine Valley, remember the unspoken rules. Never follow the howls. Never break the silence. And above all, don't look back when you hear footsteps matching your own. Because in Kine Valley, the 8th generation has already learned your name.